Hello and welcome to CIO Leadership Live in ASEAN. My name is James Henderson, Editorial Director of CIO based in Singapore, and I'll be your host today as we welcome Rahul Shinde, CIO of Coca-Cola Vietnam and our CIO 75 honoree in 2021. Rahul, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, James. Good to see you again.
I know, it's always a pleasure. Great to see you, and thank you for joining us today. Now, Rahul, really want to go into the impact of automation on the future of work and what you're seeing in Vietnam, because obviously it's a very pertinent topic, but it does vary by market and obviously by the current situation, given everyone's a little bit different as they're coming out of the pandemic. So maybe it's a good place to start. It looks like you're in the office, so maybe that's the first answer. But how are you seeing the future of work changing in Vietnam?
Yeah, like you said, it's great to be back in office. We have started coming back to a new normal, not exactly the pre-pandemic normal, but the new normal since February of this year, where Vietnam sort of opened all the restrictions from March onwards. Now, all the international travels is resumed. So yeah, things are coming back to normal. We had pretty tough last year. I don't know if you recall, but Vietnam sort of was resilient from the earlier wave of pandemic in 2020, and really started hitting us from March of 2021. And then we had a very hard, I would say hard is a milder word. It was quite strict lockdown from March until the end of October. So almost 2 quarters of business activity it was impacted. And not only business activity, there was a lot of impact on the health as well. We had pretty major wave. So yeah, it fundamentally reshaped how we work, how we approach employee well-being, and how we become more resilient. And it taught us a lot of lessons. And coming out of pandemic now, I think what we're seeing is a profound impact on how things are shifting with respect to remote work, hybrid work, with respect to business resiliency, and how as a digital is enabling all of those aspects of really thriving in this new normal. So yeah, there are few shifts which are happening both from the culture perspective and technology perspective. We'll definitely would like to touch upon in our topic today.
No, and thank you, Rahul. And it's context is key here, and every market's kind of dealing with the pandemic over the last few years, obviously differently depending on the waves. Now, I'm guessing, as I mentioned before, unless you've got a very well branded kitchen, I'm guessing you're in the office. So hybrid state, is that where you're at in Vietnam at the minute? Sometimes in the office, sometimes at home. Is that how it's landed?
Yeah, that's specific to my company. I think most of the multinational organizations have shifted to hybrid working. So 3 days in office, 2 days in office, it varies. But it also varies on the type of work you're doing for our frontline staff in supply chain or in plants and people in the market. It's pretty much full-time activity, whereas support staff like ours, we have pretty flexible working hours in terms of when we want to come to office. Having said that, different industries have adopted different styles of hybrid working. So typical manufacturing organizations or local organizations, as well as multinational. And Vietnam is a pretty big manufacturing hub, especially in the last couple of years. So they have gone back to pretty much full office first culture. So I see a lot of people traveling to the plants and to their offices, and they've pretty much resumed their activities. Whereas companies such as banking organizations, companies like ours, we have moved to a hybrid model of working, 30% working in office, whereas people have flexibility to work from home or anywhere else, even the external workplaces, co-working places. And there are companies, especially in the startup ecosystem or the IT outsourcing companies, I see they're applying fully remote or 100% remote culture. So yeah, there are different varying degree of hybrid work that is being adopted as we're coming out of pandemic in Vietnam.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, it's almost two extremes of the spectrum there. Full working from home, full back to the office, depending on sector, and you're somewhere naturally in the middle. So I think that's a good assessment, Rahul, of where things are at in Vietnam. And just on that, and specific to Coca-Cola, how are the employee requirements changing? Because obviously over the last year or two, everyone was working from home, and now there's that hybrid situation. Are they asking more of you as an employer, or even as from a technology standpoint as well?
Yes. I think there are like I mentioned earlier, the hybrid work is I would say 50% about culture and 50% about the requirement from technology perspective. And we're seeing huge cultural shift as we're coming out of pandemic. As you mentioned, last 2 years, people have been used to working from home. They've been adopted to a style of work they were not used to.
Yeah.
And we have this sort of infrastructure challenge being a developing country where people are not equipped at home to really be comfortable working from home. Smaller houses, slower internet speeds, more families sort of staying together closely. So those are the aspects that were hampering remote work in the initial part of pandemic. And we thought that that will be a deterrent to really adopt a remote culture. But people have adopted. Obviously, we provided a lot of technological support to enable them. But really, people have adopted to working remotely. And as we're coming out of pandemic, I think three themes are coming out from the employee perspective, what they're asking or what we see as something that is relevant to really thrive in the new normal. The first is the flexibility. Employees demand more flexibility. Because while we're coming out of pandemic is not really out. We still have waves of COVID that's come and go. And obviously health aspect for employees and the families is very important. And they need flexibility to be able to cater to that. So when they want to work from home, they should be able to work from home to take care of themselves and their families. And we want to continue to provide that support. So flexibility is one. The second aspect that's really important is the business resiliency, operational resiliency. What we've seen is while in the initial part of pandemic, we were just trying to survive or just maintain our operations. As we're coming out of pandemic, things are not same as what they were before. And now we have geopolitical situations, increasing commodity prices, and the amount of uncertainty still exists. And I think it will continue to stay for a while. So working through these challenges, how do we ensure that our business is resilient? And what is the implications for both employees and organizations from culture as well as ways of working perspective is important. And the third key theme that is very interesting, and we see that happening across sectors, is decentralization. In terms of the functions that were very heavily corporate or headquarters centric, a lot of teams working in single place and doing those activities. Because of remote work, it has allowed the flexibility for companies like ours to really decentralize to those functions or those areas of work, either through automation, so we have removed a lot of complexity, or moving to places where people are comfortable, so people can work from their hometown and do the same activity. And that has really pushed that sort of button to move from headquarter-centric activities to really more decentralized locations. And that is helping us as an organization as well, because a lot of companies were trying to do that earlier, but they didn't have the motivation or they didn't have the tools to do that, but pandemic has taught us, and now it's possible. So I think these three themes are emerging that's clearly impacting as we come out of pandemic from future of work perspective.
And Rahul, I presume then your response to those three themes would be continually evolving, because as you mentioned before, not everyone's got the same strategy for remote working. Some are going all in, some are doing a hybrid, some are going fully back to the office. But from your standpoint at Coca-Cola, how are you responding? You mentioned automation there as well, but you also said it's a blend of tech and culture. So I'm guessing there's some elements that you would take, and then other parts of the business would probably cover the culture bit, for example.
Yes. So at Coca-Cola, actually, we were quite early in responding to the shifting sort of trends in the work culture. So to give you an example, we were the first company to really start camp at work, which means that when we were in the middle of pandemic, we came out with a BCP plan to identify skeletal workforce that we need to be working in office. And we provided shelter at work facilities for them. So literally we had people from the plant living in office for a couple of months during that time to ensure our operations is working fine. Similarly, people out there in the market providing sales support. We provided them a lot of tools. We also provided flexible working arrangement. We also applied crowdsourcing. So a lot of the activities that sales team used to do themselves, we are now asking outlets, owners to do that for us. So I think those are the areas that we focused on. And also as a company, we focused a lot on preparing for the future. So and this is, I'm talking completely non-technical. Digital aspects is underpinning all of those areas. But from the culture perspective, we provided a lot of support from employees in adopting remote working. Every function prepared business continuity plan in case of pandemic really impact the business. How do we ensure? How do we shift production facility from one place to other place if one place goes in lockdowns? All those plans and preparations were ready. So in case we have to face the worst, we know exactly what playbook to follow. And the third aspect was really pushing hard on the employee productivity and and enabling them newer tools, not only from the digital perspective, but also upskilling them with remote learning, e-learning, as well as providing them a lot of emotional support. So we had a lot of well-being activities that were carried out during the pandemic through Teams and the collaboration tools. And from the digital perspective, obviously, as you would have seen, in the last couple of years, there was a huge push on automating a lot of the processes. And in nick of time, for example, for us, we had to ensure that people who didn't have laptop, we had to provide laptop. We were on cloud a lot earlier. So for us, it wasn't really a big shift moving to cloud. And that really helped us to actually be more resilient. But having been there was still a lot of demand in terms of how we move some of the activities that were purely office first. For example, we had teams sitting in office who were doing settlements. So they would get paper documents and they would sign, and those sort of activities really made paperless. We focused also on ensuring that employees have tools that they can use over the internet, not necessarily sitting in office network. So those were the digital areas that we focused on, and also adopting a lot of newer technologies with the help of AI. For example, RPA. We really pushed a lot of initiatives that will automate and integrate a lot of the work areas that will help us to really be able to carry those areas or tasks in the remote way.
And just to double click on a few of those elements there, Rahul, especially on the automation side. Now, we're talking here in the context of the future of work, but it sounds like it's already here. So it's probably not necessarily something that you're going to do later. You've already done it and you're looking to enhance it. How is that role of automation played in all of that? You give some great examples there, and obviously RPA, AI, lots of different elements to automation. I mean, how did you get that? How did you roll that out? Because the tools is one thing, but then obviously the culture side, because the word automation can mean lots of different connotations to people. So how did that rollout go?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we had those learnings along the way. When we initially rolled out a lot of automation initiatives, What we quickly realized that while automating certain tasks removes the paper, it doesn't necessarily reduce the work. It means that people, what they were doing earlier on paper for many years, they have to do it in some sort of form or system online.
The
And there
process
was,
time hasn't been condensed necessarily.
yeah, I mean, you can automate certain processes and reduce certain manual element of it. But what we've seen is the responsibility of doing that work shifted from, let's say, one set of people to other set of people, and there was, I won't say resistance, but there were a lot of change management that we have to handle. I think change management was the key because, and we are talking about people who are actually the doers, right? Who are not necessarily the leaders of the organization. They've been doing certain things in certain way for many years, and suddenly we have to ask them to learn new tools, new technologies, and do with the same efficiency that they were using, that they were doing earlier, which obviously is a learning curve, and that has impact, especially for business critical processes such as settlement or order processing. So we have to, and it's always a hockey stick shape sort of evolution in how automation is getting adopted. So we have to prepare for that, and culturally, because we are working remotely, that becomes a lot more difficult.
Yeah, right.
So really, a lot more sponsorship from the leaders to adopt the technology, not for the next 2 months or 3 months, but for the future, for the betterment of organization. Fortunately, our leaders are providing great support in driving some of those digital initiatives. And as we working with our partners and our system integrators, when we are rolling out these tools, we are ensuring that we are focusing a lot, not just on the technical automation aspect of it, but also on the user experience part of it. Because often that side get missed out when we focus on just process automation and look at how many hours of work is getting automated or so many signatures are getting eliminated. Is it really adding value in terms of the user experience? So we are focusing a lot on those areas, and also roles and responsibilities, because the traditional power structures, so to say, where one person had authority to inspect and authorize on paper, those are getting eliminated in certain areas through automation, because either AI is doing that work, or we have now better tools and it's more distributed. So managing those strains and stresses in the organization where HR get involved in redesigning roles, reallocating people, those are the cultural aspects that we have to ensure that we are working closely with. And CIO has to play a key role here. I think we need to be not only change instigator, but we need to play a lot more collaborative role in terms of driving the whole organization towards the future path.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's not enough for you just to supply the technology and the tools. You have the change management, to your point. I mean, and before we look ahead to some of your priorities, Rahul, just on that, looking back over the last 2 years, what pros and cons is potentially the wrong way of looking at it, because the pros are pretty clear, but maybe challenges, was it the change management side? But I mean, obviously you accounted for it. So you actually, you almost could see some of those roadblocks that are natural as part of change anyway. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say yes and no, because you can only prepare maybe 50%, but 50%.
You can't predict everything. Fair.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would say challenges, or I would say some of the watch out areas as we go through automation. One is the adoption of technology. Like I said, it's not going to be a very quick adoption, so we can't expect ROI immediately. Even though some of those technologies are being in use for many years in a lot of companies, but we have to understand here that we are dealing with people, and people are used to doing certain things certain way for many years, and it's always going to be a learning curve. The second aspect of the automation is not just about cost. I think a lot of times you make a mistake that doing automation, obviously cost is an important factor, and it has to deliver the savings. But also, apart from the savings, it's about bringing that level of resiliency in the organization. What we have seen is with automation, we are able to have some of the activities that can be now fully automated. That means we're reducing dependency on people, and there is no intrinsic financial value associated with it. But when we prepare some of the business case, we need to account for that. And I think the third most important area, I would say, from technological standpoint is, as we bringing all these automation initiatives, how does it really tie to your architecture? How does it tie to your overall system landscape, that that you're not creating silos of technical tools with SaaS tools or things that are working in isolation. One of the things that's that's paramount now is the security, and with all those, obviously there's a pressure of implementing a lot of initiatives, but we also have to ensure that we are on top of the security requirements. We are ensuring that we are following the right level of data governance, process governance structures, authorizations and accesses. So I think those three elements are important as we adopt more automation.
Great. And what next for you, Rahul? What's in the pipeline in the next few months? I mean, you've obviously ahead of the game quite a bit to have actually already started this process over the last few years. But what's going forward in terms of on your to-do list? I'm sure it's a long to-do list, of course, but what's near the top?
Yeah, there are a lot of things actually that are planned. We just prepared the long-term plan, so it's filled with a lot of digital initiatives, which is good for us. But I think the key themes that's emerging is we're going to see a lot more process automation. We're just scratching the surface, and as we are doing more workshops, we're putting use cases. People are coming and asking for more. So I see the adoption of RPAs and sophisticated tools is going to get wider and wider. So we see a lot more use cases now being identified, and we'll work through those in the next year or two. Apart from that, like I mentioned, the automation initiatives around frontline workers. So it could be supply chain digitization. That's a big area for us. Automation of lines, also providing a lot more mobile first technologies, because they were typically not so prevalent in the pre-pandemic world. Remote asset monitoring is a big area for us, because we have a lot of assets out there in the markets, and how do we ensure that we're able to track that? And data analytics, I think it's been a lot of focus on, especially now that things are very changing very quickly. How do we make sense of all those and getting the right data from right sources, putting together use cases with the help of AI and supporting data technologies is going to be important.
Great, Rahul. Well, as you mentioned, you phrased it perfectly there, scratching the surface in terms of RPA and automation. So I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation and seeing how those projects and deployments roll out. So Rahul, thank you enormously for your time, and best of luck to you and the team at Coca-Cola Vietnam as well. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, James. My pleasure.